You are watching the Fayetteville Government Channel. Up next, full coverage of the latest City of Fayetteville ward meeting. Ward meetings are held at various times by City Council members to interact with and receive feedback from the residents of their ward.
Why don't we introduce ourselves? You want to do that, Star?
Yeah.
Welcome to the June meeting of Ward 4.
Yeah, my name's Alan Long. I'm Ward 4 Position 2 Representative.
And I'm Rhonda Adams, Ward 4 Position 1 Representative. Thanks all for being here tonight.
And I'm Peter Niergarten. I'm the City's Director of Sustainability and Strategic Planning.
I'm Perry Human, Fayetteville PD.
Deborah Cunliffe, resident, Ward 4.
Robert Albertson, resident, Ward 4, Hartman Avenue.
Tom Bohan, resident.
Thank you all for being here. Rhonda, do we just want to go ahead and turn it over to Peter? Peter's going to talk to us about the new urban agriculture food policies that the City of Fayetteville is working on, and also a little bit about the Safe Routes to School grant that the City of Fayetteville just received for the first time.
All right. I'll start with the Safe Routes to Schools grant, if that's all right with you guys. So last week we got notice from the Arkansas Highway Commission, here's the letter right here, that we received a grant that Rhonda and Alan both endorsed in a letter as part of the application, but it's for $81,000, and it's going to fund a trail bridge along Salem Road over Clapper Creek. And that trail bridge, it's going to be wide enough eventually to incorporate the Clapper Creek Trail. Initially it's going to be built. It'll connect two pieces of sidewalk. And here's a, whoops. Here is a map of the location of the trail. I can zoom out. So the red, here's where the trail bridge will be. The reason this was really appropriate for Safe Routes to Schools is because we have two schools nearby, Holcomb Elementary and Holton Middle School. As I said, it will cross Clapper Creek right here. It will connect two pieces of sidewalk that essentially just go to either side of this creek, and it's essentially dead end right now, which forces pedestrians or people who are riding a bike on the sidewalk have to go out into the street to get across the creek. So it'll remove that safety barrier, and then in conjunction with this 317 feet of sidewalk that the city is going to build later this year, it'll complete about it's about 3,000 feet of continuous sidewalk going north-south along Salem Road, and it'll really enhance the walkability of that neighborhood and provide better connectivity for school kids or for parents who choose to walk their children to school in the neighborhood.
How much is the grant, Peter?
The grant is for $81,000, and it'll fund the construction of that bridge where the red is located. And that was the most expensive. It's short, but because it's a bridge, it was one of the most expensive pieces. So it's a prefabricated metal trail bridge, similar to the ones you've seen on a lot of the like the Skull Creek Trail. There's several of those types of bridges crossing over Skull Creek.
They cost a lot of money.
Yeah, they do.
And they look very nice.
Yep, they do. So, very excited to report
Safe
that.
Routes to School, there are only a few grants available each year.
Yeah, and
I don't remember the number.
I don't either. I was trying to research before this meeting to find out how much money was handed out across the state and where else applications were awarded, but I wasn't able to find that.
Well, I kind of remember thinking we'd be lucky to get this.
Yeah, I kind of was as well. We haven't ever gotten it before, so it's the first time for us, so that's pretty exciting.
Well, good job writing the grant.
Yeah.
Thank you for doing that.
Thank you guys again for your endorsement of the project and for writing a letter to include with our application. We appreciate that.
And then as we extend Clapper Creek Trail, we're getting a lot of things done on the west side of
Yeah, that trail will, you know, you can see here there's already a portion of Clapper Creek Trail that's been constructed here. So when this bridge is in, there'll be this yellow piece that'll eventually get built. This piece up here that'll tie back into the trail that runs along Interstate 540, and that'll eventually tie into the Skull Creek Trail and Frisco Trail and provide nice trail connectivity to the rest of the city.
Good, thank you.
Very exciting.
Yeah, I think there may be some Ward 4 citizens who don't know that we've decided to kind of punch out that Copper Creek Trail extension and move it a little up on the list of things, and so.
Couple years.
Couple years up, that's right. So, is that right?
Yeah,
2 years?
2 years.
So, that's, this plus that is
Yeah.
gonna really be
Yeah.
some good connection to, that part of Ward 4.
And I was telling Peter before the meeting started, when we were at the Arkansas Municipal League Conference, several other municipalities received some grants for safe routes to schools, but Fayetteville did get the largest grant. Very interesting and excited that y'all did that.
Thank you for seeking those opportunities. I think it takes support of the city, but it also takes great staff members to actually go out there and go to the trouble to, so that's good.
Yeah, it was definitely a team effort. The school district deserves part of the credit as well. We worked with them. Of course, they have a lot of the statistics we needed to justify the need, the number of students in the area. So some of the credit goes to Dana Smith, the Portland Public Schools Sustainability Coordinator as well.
Do you live east, west of 540?
Yes, I am.
So is this in your neighborhood?
No, I'm over by Boyding Girls Club.
Okay, good. So you're
I'm
kind of.
further on the other side of
Yeah.
Salem.
Well, I know we have a lot of citizens and many who have been here at this meeting who've been concerned about the Clabber Creek, just wanting us to get all connected out there. And the biggest thing about this to me was the safety issue. We want to get our kids, we know that it's healthy for kids to walk to school, it saves the environment, and it's good for kids. And so that's what the crux of this grant is, to be able to walk to school and get there safely. And so I'm just delighted about that. Thank you, Peter.
Yeah, you're welcome. Any questions?
Okay,
Okay.
let's go to peanut trees and mediums or something like that.
Peanut tree.
What do you think about that? Do peanuts grow on trees?
I think they do. I think it's more of a shrub. They
Okay.
grow,
Not a decorative shrub.
And what do we do about the squirrels who want to eat all that stuff that's in the mediums? I mean, those are the questions I've been hearing.
They're potentially urban food as well.
Oh, man. What do you think,
Wow.
Alan?
I'll have to ask.
It's a jungle out there.
It's a jungle out there.
So, another project my department has been working on are revisions to the city code related to urban agriculture. And we did a little bit, but urban agriculture essentially is defined as being able to grow and produce food inside the city limits, whether it's vegetables or fruits or animal products. And I'll preface this by saying it varies widely across the board in terms of what is going on in other communities across the country, from absolutely nothing to the sky's the limit. And so what we're attempting to do is find the right balance for the city of Fayetteville in terms of what the community needs and what citizens feel is appropriate for agricultural practices inside our city limits, because I think we would all agree that we live in a city, we don't live out in unincorporated county somewhere. So there has to be some sort of balance that is met there in terms of what is appropriate. So just a little bit of the background of why we're invoking this process. You can read the statistics up here, but the 1 in 6 Americans fighting hunger, the number is actually 1 in 4 in northwest Arkansas in terms of number of people fighting hunger, and 19% of Arkansans being food insecure. That's food insecure is defined as not having access to enough healthy fruits and vegetables and protein to basically not be hungry. And so there's been a real recognition of this disparity between those that have plenty to eat and a significant portion of the population that just doesn't have enough to eat, combined with this recognition of and there's been a lot of national talk about food miles, how far food comes to us, a lot of it from California or other far reaches of the globe. The average meal travels about 1,500 miles before it gets to your plate. That's a really long distance. There's a lot of nutrition that's lost. Some statistics say up to 80% of the nutritional value of that food is lost in those 1,500 miles, and not to mention the carbon implications of those 1,500 miles. And then local food is seen as potentially being able to support our local economy. So there's an economic consideration as well. So recognizing all of that data, some local food organizations, Feed Fayetteville, Fayetteville Farmers Market, Fayetteville Forward Local Foods Group got together and conducted a survey asking residents what the city could do to better enable citizens to meet more of their food needs on a local basis, and with the idea of promoting urban agriculture. Some of the ideas that we heard were planning and zoning changes to increase access or ease restrictions, allow the selling of food on site where some of these products are being produced inside the city, look at our animals and fowl ordinance for potential expansion, and then also allowing for animals at educational facilities for educational purposes. So in March, City Council passed a resolution of intent asking staff to begin looking at urban agriculture and potential revisions to planning and zoning that would better enable citizens to have access to local foods, and that passed unanimously at City Council. After that, we began working with a group of stakeholders. We've identified several specific barriers through that stakeholder process to urban agriculture. A couple of those are, right now our current zoning code says you can have a maximum of 4 chickens inside the city limit on any single-family residential lot. It doesn't matter if your lot is 2,500 square feet or 25,000 square feet. All you can have is 4 chickens. So there's no real variation allowed for how much land you have. No other animals are allowed. No other farm animals are allowed inside the city. Animals are not allowed at educational facilities. There's a recognition that we have limited access to community gardens, particularly in locations where we have large multifamily complexes and rental properties. We have a high number of college students, a high number of rental properties in town, and we don't have any community gardens to speak of that are near the highest, the places in Fayetteville that have the highest densities. And whether those are city-operated community gardens or private community gardens doesn't necessarily matter to the end user, but they're just not, they're not there, they're not available to folks. The on-site sales piece, so essentially the way our code is written, on-site sales of small-scale agriculture would be considered a limited business, and right now limited business practices are not allowed on lands that would be most appropriate for urban agriculture, so that's a little bit of a disconnect that shouldn't be too difficult to fix. Rhonda mentioned the peanut trees in the right-of-way. We have a systematic at peanut trees. I'm not even sure that a peanut grows this far north, but I'll look into that. But fruit and nut producing trees inside the right-of-way is one thing that was identified, and then gleaning. There is language, depending on how you interpret it, inside the parks ordinance that could prohibit the gleaning of fruit off of trees that are planted in parks specifically for the purpose of providing fruit for people. So we just need to fix that whole piece as well. Now, I will say this is just an example of a recommended change related to animals. It's something that the numbers are not necessarily what we're considering. More what we're considering is this idea of a 1 per X number of square feet for the number of animals allowed. Right now, so far as stakeholders, we've focused on chickens and bees. Our stakeholder group seems to think that those chickens seem to be most important for a food-producing component because of the eggs and the high value they have for protein, and bees in terms of greater ecosystem services. You may have heard the epidemic that's been sweeping the country in terms of colony collapse disorder, and many of the native bees, live out in the wild, have been dying off, and so there's been a push to try and get more, there to be more apiaries, more managed bee colonies to provide for pollination of trees and flowers, and just provide all the benefits that bees provide for us. So we're continuing our public stakeholder, our stakeholder meeting process approximately monthly. Those meetings will continue. We'll be doing upcoming meetings in each of the wards once we finally get the draft changes out there. So we'll be coming back to each ward and presenting those and having an opportunity for input. We'll be taking them into the Planning Commission. And finally on the City Council, well, I'm sure we'll get plenty of time to debate the merits and the details of the proposed changes. And once we finally get things all passed, signed, sealed, and delivered, then we'll be rolling out some educational literature. These are some examples from Columbia and from Cleveland, Ohio, in terms of what the new ordinances will and will not allow. We've got information on our website if you care to learn more. And with that, I'll open it up to any questions.
So do you recommend that citizens go look at Columbia and Cleveland's websites to kind of see what, I mean, is it kind of a best practice for our own planning practices?
It's hard to say what, best practices. It definitely, it varies from city to city. No city seems to have, that I've been able to find, like a total, complete package. And so what we've been doing is kind of piecemealing from different places. We have looked at Cleveland stuff. Columbia has a really good chicken ordinance that we've looked at. Lawrence, Kansas has a good chicken ordinance we've looked at. We've spent a lot of time looking at what we've been calling our peer cities. A lot of them are college towns sort of in the region. Stillwater, Oklahoma, Denton, Texas, Iowa City, Iowa, Chapel Hill, North Carolina, places like that. So yeah, you can definitely look at those. A lot of the code is really kind of difficult to read. And
Are chickens what you all in the planning world at the City of Fayetteville hear about the most in our city currently?
Probably because we have it, a chicken ordinance. It's actually an animals and fowls ordinance. One of the books that everybody calls it the chicken ordinance. So yeah, probably it is. Although what I've heard right now is that we tend not to get too many complaints unless it has to do with a rooster, because roosters make noise. Yeah. And I haven't found any cities that are allowing roosters inside the city limits, and I don't think there's much appetite to allow roosters inside Fayetteville. So I don't see that as being up for much debate.
If we're concerned about food issues, it's like rabbits would be a good. Rabbits are a great food source.
Yeah, and rabbits are, rabbits are, rabbits are on our next food policy discussion. They're on our agenda to talk about. We just haven't as a group gotten to rabbits
Got there yet?
Yeah.
Would I need a variance to have a couple of alpacas and a couple of sheep in my yard? Could I get one?
It depends on what zoning you have. So right now, they would be allowed on lands that are zoned either RA, residential agriculture, or there's a couple of industrial zonings. You probably don't live in industrial zoning.
Single family.
Single family. I don't even know if there's a variance process.
Would this be a complaint-driven type of ordinance?
Yeah. Generally, that's how these ordinances have worked in Fayetteville. And so if there's not a problem, then generally you're okay. But if somebody complains, you don't have any protection unless we change the code. So right now, if somebody has 4 chickens, they're fine if their neighbor complains. But if they have 6, if they have a 25,000 square foot lot, somebody complains, well, then we've got an issue. So the idea is to, bring the code more in line with what the community's values are and offer some protection to those that, there might be a complaint at some point.
So, Mr. Albertson, I think your question is so good because when Alderman Long and I decided that we'd like to have Mr. Nierengarten here, we were thinking that we wanted to invite Ward 4 citizens to talk about things that either might be bothering or that they might want. So I don't know which one that was for you, but when you think about sheep and alpaca, you might wish you could have a couple of alpaca in your backyard, and it would be a good time to, as they're developing code possibilities and looking at their list of things to consider, we thought it would be good to share this here on television and with people that are here, so they could bring up the things that maybe, that's why I said chickens are, we know that. We get complaints about roosters, and chickens make noise. Rabbits, I haven't heard much about. Alpacas, I know of a couple, but nobody's complained about them either. So exactly to the reason that we thought it was important to have this small input session, we want the citizens of Ward 4 to think about things that maybe our staff, I don't know if you know we have alpacas in Ward 4, but they're just beautiful. And we have women who sit and knit socks from their, and from their wool, and it's a beautiful thing. Now, is it acceptable inside city limits? And so I think that's what we were hoping this session would be, an opportunity for citizens to mention things that maybe aren't being talked about among our planning staff. Is that right, Alan?
Yeah, I mean, because sometimes some people might consider an alpaca less obtrusive than a barking dog. So, you know, you just have to figure out what the community standards want to be. And one question I've gotten since this discussion started is where do covenants come into play when certain neighborhoods have covenants, and will those covenants still be enforceable with the ordinance? And I think the way we're looking at it is covenants can be more strict than the ordinance.
They trump.
They trump the ordinance.
If you have covenants that say you can't have farm animals in your neighborhood or subdivision, no matter what we change here, those covenants will still be in effect and remain unchanged.
So in our own Ward 4, Bridgeport, for example, has done signs in the yard. They can't put campaign signs, for example, in the yard, and so though the city allows that, the covenants of that can be do not.
Well, we teach the rabbits to lay eggs, and then so
They don't lay eggs?
Are ducks covered in the ordinance?
You know, the way the animals and fowl ordinance is written right now, you know, duck is technically a fowl.
Right.
And but in several places in a couple places in the ordinance it refers to hens, which a female duck is a hen.
Right.
But then in a couple other places it refers specifically to chickens. So it's kind of unclear whether or not ducks are covered. So that is one of the things that we're cleaning up. The way that the draft language is written right now, we're calling them acceptable fowl or approved. That's not the right. I can't think of the right word, but we're defining what fowl is, and we're saying chickens and ducks. So we're
Guineas? Someone asked me about that last week.
about guineas.
Uh-huh.
I don't know that as much about guineas.
And peacocks. The same person asked me about guineas.
We have peacocks in my neighborhood.
Yeah, I don't know.
They've been there before the neighborhood, so they get to stay. Yeah.
We've got everything in our neighborhood.
Yeah.
But it seems like if the overarching idea here is food, it seems like there are two different things going on. If people want to keep animals for pets, in fact, peacocks.
Yeah, peacock is more of a pet, really, I think.
That's not really.
Is an alpaca a pet?
I don't think you eat them or not.
Well, it can provide clothing, so it's not food, but it's
agriculture and sort of process.
Yeah. I mean, I would say that alpaca probably qualifies more under urban agriculture, not so much food, but
I don't know if you can eat an alpaca. I don't.
That's the end of the question. We're so glad you're here. Come up and join us.
I can hear you.
All right. So, yeah, a horse has come up, goats come up. I mean,
Cows
people.
have come up.
Yeah.
And again, all of that is allowed on anything right now that is zoned residential, agricultural, or a couple of industrial zones. It's just any of the other, all the other zonings are what we're talking about with this. It's all residential zonings.
Would the code include something about food or production that you have to, in order to keep these various animals, you have to have some kind of food or production, like clothing? Purpose, or because I can see people having all kinds of animals and have nothing to do with food, which is where you started the presentation.
Yeah. No, that's an interesting question.
And how would you enforce that?
Yeah, I mean that's really the
You've got to slaughter that sheep
right.
or whatever.
And I don't know that we want to write it such that it's concise, clear, enforceable, and not getting into people's business too much. So I'm not exactly sure where that conversation would take us.
That's a really good question, though, because unenforceable ordinances really bother me a lot. I'm not a fan. And so, very good question when you think about an alpaca or when you know you could eat a rabbit, but is that why you have the rabbits in your yard?
Technically now you can keep rabbits for pets.
I can see some people saying that what you're doing is creating an opportunity for a zoo. And if somebody wants to has 2 acres, 3 acres, they can keep all kinds of animals on the property without any food protection at all, or any kind of purpose, other than just keeping the animals and enjoying them. And that would be a different kind of thing to allow. I think some people would object to that, whereas they might not if it had to do with food production, or people having the ability to feed themselves.
And it kind of ties into that conversation is when they're native animals that people have on their property, like rabbits, they're considered a native animal. That would tie back into the nuisance section of our animal ordinances, because people can still, say they're a nuisance if they're not contained properly. I don't know how that would fit in, but it's something to think about native animals versus what do we normally have in
invasive animals.
And that feeds to the email that I'm sure you and I both got. I always assume we got the same one, even if we don't see each other's names, that I live in a city for a reason, and I don't want animals in my neighbor's backyard in pens or fences, or to let them live outside of city limits. You kind of mentioned that, Peter, in your...
We heard the same comment.
Yeah.
I don't know if I got the same one, but I got a similar one at least.
Kind of how far do we go to, even with food, even when you think about food, so...
You have a lot of ordinances, I guess, now. What brought all this on? I came in late. I missed the best part of it, I guess. Is it concerned citizens that are saying we need to change our... You have rules now.
It's need of food and an effort to be less dependent on 1,500 miles of travel for food to get to a dinner table. So encouraging young people, school children, families to learn to grow our...
So now they can't do it. Legally, you can't do it.
And so it is a disincentive to teach children where food comes from if the laws of the city, the ordinances of the city don't allow it. And so
we already have ordinances that don't allow it. Is that what you're saying?
you can only have 4 chickens in your yard.
I've got more than 4 rabbits in my yard.
You do?
They're exploding out west. I can count 10 any morning, and I live in Cross Keys. There's this mowed grass. They're everywhere. They're exploding. I, as a youngster, ate them, but I can't shoot them. They still get me right.
Well, see, that's another piece of this whole thing to me.
Yeah.
Do we allow, I talked to Peter a little bit about this book I'm reading called Nature Wars. I'm going to give it to you soon, but do we allow a hunting season? They did in Eureka Springs recently. They allowed a bow and arrow hunting season on deer in town because vehicle deer collisions.
Bella Vista does it, and these, but
yeah.
I guess
rabbits, squirrels. What do? Do we also, in part of this whole food thing, start killing the deer? Is that more?
There aren't ordinances. What you're saying is there aren't ordinances that allow you to have animals now. So you're creating. I missed the first part of this, and I'm just kind of getting up to speed.
Well, you caught those 10 rabbits and put them in your backyard right now and then ate them.
They live in my backyard. They live under the house. Under the back
so they're feral rabbits.
They're feral rabbits,
yeah. Those are okay.
Those are okay.
Can't do anything about those.
And when it gets cold, Tularemia will get all of them. They'll be gone. And next year they'll do it again. And so disease knocks them down big time in the winter. But
what gets them?
Tularemia. They have diseases that just whack them. You'd think they would have built a resistance, but they don't seem to have done it. And most of them will just die.
Should we have a hunting season on those rabbits?
No, I don't think so. I'm not advocating that at all. I just wondered, it seems like we're complicating things, and that was all I was, you know, you start changing, I didn't know what the ordinances were now, what the rules were now.
One of
And
the
that's
things
what-
I think that
that's
we're talking
my-
about is right-of-ways. Does a city utilize its right-of-ways? I think some cities started there, from what I've read, that you have a lot of right-of-ways that you have to mow and water and plant and keep up.
Right.
And if your citizens see that your right-of-way is looking ugly, they start calling the city and say, please mow that, it looks bad. Plus, right-of-ways in less traveled areas. We talk about Rupel Road, which is a Ward 4 issue. So when we talk about traveling Rupel Road, and it's right now not developed, it's undeveloped property, you could read things that say that the growth along Rupel Road, the grass, the high grass and all, is perfect for deer. They're out there now. And so if you put a road through there, then the deer start crossing the roads, right, before development is there. And then we have more of a problem of deer-car collisions. So how do you thin out the deer, or do you just mow the grass? Well, you need people to mow. You know, services equals people. So you need more people to mow more land because you built more streets. So I think part of it is, how do we utilize the property that the city owns? Do we plant peanuts? Or do we shoot the deer? Or do we grow, there are some other things besides peanuts, Peter, I know, but pecans. And do we let people harvest the fruit from the trees that we plant in our public parks? So that's sort of where we are, is partly an economic value of growing things that people will be interested in, rather, I don't know. Is that
Okay, so
right?
we're just tossing out ideas, is what Peter.
Yeah.
Okay, I thought that there was something in the
Well,
works.
they're working on it. Our
Right.
city staff is working on an improvement plan, maybe.
When other cities grow plant products in right-of-ways, well, is it just sort of open season on pecans or whatever it is that's grown, blueberries or whatever, or the city harvest and then sell? And I mean, that sounds like it's not as easy as it sounds. I
Yeah,
suspect it's
yeah.
just anybody can go out there and take whatever they like.
Again, it varies across the board. Yeah, some have done production, put trees into production. Others rely on the property owners that are adjacent to the right-of-way to manage and maintain or even plant and then manage, maintain, and pick the fruit off of the trees that are growing in the right-of-way. What I've seen work well is only allowing fruit-producing trees in those right-of-way spaces that are more generous, so that your fruit's not dropping off cars in the street or on the sidewalks, so that it actually lands in the grassy area. And it seems like, you're talking to a few different folks around town, there's a variety of pear tree that could do really well in that kind of more harsh urban condition that right-of-way tends to be. So it varies quite a bit.
I think you had your hand up, I'm sorry.
That's all right. Are you thinking of making the code specific to the types of animals? Okay, so chickens, X number for this much space.
Yeah.
For alpacas, X number for a
Good
larger.
question.
Yeah, so if you look
So
back,
it will be very.
yeah, larger space requirement for larger animals.
I thought I had glanced at that.
Yeah, if you look at what Cleveland did, you can see, 800 square feet per chicken, duck, or rabbit, which are all about the same size.
Mm-hmm.
And then 2,400 square feet for every goat, pig, or sheep,
Okay.
and then 2,400 square feet for the beef. So yes, that's the model we're looking at. I think that
I
makes,
kind of figured you
I think
would,
that makes
but-
sense. I mean, different larger
Yeah.
animals require
They need more space.
That's gonna, enforce itself pretty much. If you're limited in, by so much square footage, that in itself will.
Yeah, a lot of it's going to be, the code will hopefully mimic common sense,
Mhm.
Right.
hopefully, in that, we're not going to allow more critters than the land could, than the carrying capacity of the land.
I think that a lot of this is about cleaning up some portions to meet the needs of our community. I know about 3 months ago, I was approached by some organizers at Feed Fayetteville, and they wanted to have chickens, that type of fowl, at a school, and they were going to be able to apply for a grant that from a local building supply that would build a chicken coop actually at the school. But with our ordinances in place, we can't have chickens in educational facilities, even though we can have them at residences. So by changing the ordinance to match what our community needs, we'll be able to even help better educate the children too. So I think that'll be a great benefit from the change.
So the educational benefits of teaching children is probably, to grow their own food is probably one of the precipitating factors of going back and considering a code that hasn't been changed in a long time, I think. The
Chicken ordinance has been in effect since 08 or 09.
We're looking at 5 years or more since we've actually gone back and picked this thing apart to see what we might do to make it. We want to be more friendly and careful at the same time, and I think that's the important balance. You use the word here, and I appreciate you saying that. Do you have any issues in your neighborhood that would have brought you to this?
No, I didn't know that was the
Yeah,
topic.
okay. Good. Okay, I wondered if you had anything. I mean, I think in my neighborhood, the roosters are definitely, I guess when you go buy little chickens, you don't really know what they are, then they become noisy later on, and so that is an issue. A lot of people still sleep with their windows open, and they don't want to hear a rooster at 5 a.m. So.
Do you get many calls, or do you have to respond to many calls from the police department? From, not roosters particularly, but just animals in general, besides barking dogs.
Mainly dogs.
Yeah. So not a large complaint.
No.
Amount of complaints.
No, not on chickens or sometimes chickens.
Yeah.
Like I say, the roosters and all that, but not very often.
One of my main interests in this issue has been that one of my New Year's resolution in January was to get a community garden started west of 540 and talk to some people. We have a lot of students who rent and they don't have access to the ground to grow a garden, and so started talking to people. And what has kept me from getting somewhere from here in part is the maintenance, the continuing this, and so I think part of this ordinance has to be to consider. It's kind of easy to put something into effect, but you've got to maintain what you put out there, and so maintenance again equals services equals people equals tax dollars. So if Peter could speak to us for a moment about what it means to have a community garden that is operated by the city versus a community garden that is maintained and operated by a group with its own dollars, which means fencing and watering and running the water to the garden. Can you help us with some understanding there?
Well, our community gardens right now are operated through a Parks and Recreation Department, and they have a application process for getting a plot at those two facilities, the one at Walker Park and the one at the Yvonne Richardson Center. That, as you mentioned, there are no city-operated facilities west of 540. There is a large, I guess it's a church. It's operated by a religiously affiliated organization, kind of further west out on Weddington. I'm forgetting the name of it.
Covenant Church.
I can't remember. But in any case, there definitely is a maintenance aspect to community gardens, as well as just a funding requirement to get them set up. And one of the models that I've seen in Lawrence, Kansas, that I really liked was this idea of the city taking surplus property that we're not using or underusing and making it available for lease to a nonprofit or maybe even a for-profit entity to develop their own business plan and proposal for some type of a community garden to go on that piece of property, and then they manage, maintain, operate the community garden space, and the city steps back and just says, okay, you pay your lease payment once a year, maybe that's only $10 or something like that, whatever we want to charge. And it takes our already slim and depleted resources out of the equation and puts it into the hands of those that really can care about the facility. So that's something that we're also looking at. It's this model from Lawrence, Kansas.
They do a lot of that in Europe, as I understand it. It's a municipal ground that's leased to a condominium, in effect.
Sure.
A group that maintains it, then subleases the plots to the people who want to grow.
And there would be nothing to prevent a group of, tenants, if you will, from creating a structure at a rental complex, apartment complex or whatever, and doing something similar, working with their landlord in order to create their own sort of community garden for that rental property. And I see it really as an attractive feature that a rental property owner could offer to potential tenants, because many more people these days are wanting to have access to their own garden space. So.
Then I can just have one row.
Yeah.
If I want.
I can just have my little,
Yeah.
5x5 plot inside there, and my next door neighbor's plot as well. It's almost like a little community building space.
So that's kind of what I've heard when I talk to Ward 4 citizens about this. I hear one person over here would like it, and this student over here would love it, but then there's kind of no community. It's the community garden, has to be a community effort, and so what you're saying is that buy-in to this plot, even if it's $10 a year, it's better than trying to set something up and then seeing if you can get people to support it and maintain it. So thank you for, that's exactly, very helpful, I think. Any thoughts on community gardens in Ward 4? No?
I really think, the location is key, getting them as close as possible to that, most dense place where people don't have access to their own yards. It doesn't make sense in my mind to put a community garden in the middle of the subdivision that people already have, quarter-acre yards where they've got plenty of garden space in their own personal yard. It needs to be strategically located where folks don't have their own yards.
So if anybody not here is watching Ward 4, I'd be very interested in talking about that and getting one set up on public land. But I want a group. I don't want to just have one person.
Yeah.
If there's a maintenance and there's a setup cost. And when I talked to Connie at Parks and Rec, the fencing and the water and the, you're talking about a pretty huge just get it started cost. And so we need more than one or two people who would like that. Especially if they're students and they don't plan to be here for long term, then you start being concerned about how long the maintenance of that or how long that will go on. So, good. Mr. Albertson. What?
I'd love to have a garden, but I've got rabbits coming out of the woods and everything. So it's self-enforcing over there. Down by the creek, I've got too many rabbits and critters.
You and Larry.
I spend too much time fencing.
It's just there.
And deer,
Deer can really, and raccoons,
the foxes are the foxes.
Yeah. The groundhog, my washroom.
Wow, well, that's what you think about community gardens. If people aren't there except to work on it, how do you maintain just that? I mean, so you're talking about the pear trees and the right-of-ways maybe being something we can plant that doesn't require raccoons maybe that won't climb up.
What a raccoon's affinity for pears is.
I think they have an affinity for most things.
Our garden kids.
They love sweet corn, I can tell you that. Raccoons can go grow corn pretty fast.
Yeah, I've seen that before.
Yeah, Living with Nature, and the name of this book that I really recommend is called Nature Wars. And if anybody, and I'm going to get it to you, Peter, in the next week or so, but again, this Wall Street Journal guy wrote this book on how we love nature, most of us, and we probably aren't here tonight unless we care about our city and the environment and the people who live here, and yet we have sprawled onto their land. They were here first. Who said that? You did. And so when we move out into their land, then we're kind of from the Bambi generation. We said, well, that's cute to have a deer in my yard, so I like that, and I do. And they're like, well, darn, they just ate all my corn, so I can't grow my own food anymore. And so how do we make city code balance with our love of the environment and nature? And it's a bit of a war, for lack of a better word, that we have to try to figure out how to coexist for the better of both the humans and the non-humans, right?
Yeah.
And care about the people who can't afford to feed themselves properly, and that is a big concern in wards where we have some very big issues with homelessness and hunger and poverty, and it doesn't take, you don't have to drive very far to see it, and so we're trying to address that at the same time through some of these.
Working with some of these nonprofits who have talked about the food insecurity, you know, you don't really think about those things until you talk to some of the people who work in those fields, and just learning about how many people in Fayetteville alone or in Washington County that don't know where their next meal is coming from really makes you want to address some of this. Just do the best we can do to balance those things.
Well said. A lot of people who give from their hearts every day in this area, trying to get people fed. And a lot of Ward 4 citizens, JP's not here tonight, but people who are working with our soup kitchens and volunteering, and it's good work. There's a lot of great citizens in our ward. Peter, thank you. I don't have any more questions, do you?
I don't either.
You want to talk about your...
Oh, you go first.
Do we want to go to community issues, neighborhood issues, Ward 4 specific? Do you need to go home to get your kids? If you do,
I would love
we're going to
to,
be
yeah.
here about 15 more minutes, and we understand because you've been on the job for 12 hours already today.
Thank you
you,
for coming.
Peter, very much.
Thank you for having me.
And if I can take something upstairs for you or something, let me know.
No, it's fine.
Thank you.
Thank you again.
Appreciate you. Best city staff ever. Mr. Albertson, you want to talk about our neighborhood?
I would love to talk to her about our neighborhood and pay compliments to a number of people who work for the city. At the same time, I have a number of them on speed dial. I'll start with the police department. I once worked for the police department in a foreign country. I know sometimes it's dangerous, and other times it's just warning. However, I have called on the police a number of times to enforce laws, particularly, specifically the law that says you can't park on this side of the street, and yet the car parks right under the sign or next to the sign. And I'm concerned, my concern is, of course, is they can park on the other side of the street, and if they could just tell me when my house is going to catch on fire, when I was going to have a heart attack, or my wife was going to have a heart attack, then I would know when I didn't mind them parking on both sides of the street, slowing down that fire truck or that ambulance. But I haven't found any of them that can tell me that. So I call the police from time to time, and I point out that there's a car or cars that has been parked in the shadow of a, can't park here sign for some time. And the response has been, well, how long has it been there? And I don't care. However, most of the time when I wake up, it's been there overnight. And that becomes a concern. Nighttime parking. And I talked to the man who's in charge of traffic, and he came out and I talked to him on the phone. And some parts of my street, Hartman, you can park on both sides.
Some parts?
Some parts of it you
not
can, but
all
not all of
parts.
it. It's 3 blocks long. I live
Yeah.
on North Hartman, which is connects with Sawyer Lane, and you can't park on either side. And if you do, then that emergency vehicle's not going to get to my house without slowing down or having to go around another way, and I don't want that.
Do you think it's confusing to the people who are parking there?
Absolutely not.
Not,
Unless they can't
okay,
read.
not confusing, okay.
Only people who can't read.
Okay,
A lot of times it's workmen who are just too darn lazy to walk 15 feet across the street, to park on the right side and to walk across the street, and that annoys me, because it's just pure laziness. However, again, the police have always been very polite and somewhat responsive. I was annoyed the other day when nothing was done about a car for about 24 hours. A big car parked in the shadow of one of those signs. However, As I said, sometimes it's boring, sometimes it's dangerous, and I'm probably like bored. Telephone call. And they've got lots of other things to do other than chase down people who park in the shadow of those signs. So, you know, I cut them a lot of slack on that department. The people that I have also on speed dial is the people in the ordinance department that supports the occupancy ordinances. A fellow named Chad Ball, a great guy. I've got to take my hat off to him. And another fellow who kind of works at the coalface of ordinance enforcement. I forget his name, but he's the guy that has to go knock on the door and face these alpha males and young agro student types who don't like what they hear, that they have to live within the law. And the law says you can't have more than 3 people living in the house unless it's a family, because they've got 4 to 6. I have documented 13 houses on 3 streets, 4 streets, if you count. If you count Potts, Palmer, Hartman, and Garden. Since the bubble burst, and the people who bought houses thinking that they can sell them and make money got stuck with them, what they have done on a number of them is they've remodeled, made them 4 or 5 bedroom warehouses for students, or whoever else.
Is it the number of people, or is it the way they're behaving in?
I was going to get to that, because indeed there are some specific residences in which I would like to see them go tomorrow, because they threaten me. You know, terroristic threat. I'm a referee, so I'm used to terroristic threats. But I have been threatened. I have been asked to come down in the street. I've had vandalism done to my vehicles. I've had an old widow lady that I work for threatened. And this is all by one jerk. And the people who live close to me, next to me, don't own a house. They turn their backyard into a gravel parking lot, and there's either 5 to 7 cars there, depending on if 1 or 2 of their girlfriends are camping out. Then they use the calendar. They have a lot of luck in that department. But they don't like the privacy fence that I built, so I don't have to look at this parking lot and their ATV and their boat and their trucks. You know, and they abuse me. I'm used to that. That doesn't bother me. What bothers me is, and what bothers my wife is, the loss of property value. That house is our biggest investment. And it's going down the girdler with 13 houses being turned into student housing. And students, as I remember, have an entirely different view toward private property and appropriate behavior than people of my vintage. And I would love to have any of you that my neighbors live next to you. You wouldn't, but just live next to you for a month or 2 and see what that does to your property values, your peace of mind, yada, 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 all that. That's why I'm here, and that's what and again, I want to touch on Chad and his department having good. They opened up the window when they go around and take a look at homes. They go at 7:30, yada, yada. I'm blessed with having a wife that works for the Veterans Administration Hospital, you know, tries to put people back together again. She gets up at 4, and I get up at 4. My job is to make coffee and to make sure her Pomeranian gets back in the house. And after I have my breakfast and read the paper, it's about 5:30, and I walk around the neighborhood, and I take pictures to help Chad and the other fellows. And they're all here. And it's, sure, I'll leave them. That's the reason I took them, is because I'm up and around at hours that they're not. In the morning, before they all get out of bed, and in the evening, before I go to bed, you know, they're there. They're living. And the ordinance says they can't. They shouldn't. I have talked to the mayor about it. He put me in touch with Yolanda Fields. She told me what the system is to you know, they investigate, they ask. And I was a school teacher for enough time. They ask, and believe it or not, they get right about that. And that's why I'm taking pictures. You can't lie about the pictures. One bloke's got 6 cars and 1 motorcycle. And that's, he himself has 4. If that is his wife. And he's got 2 renters. And it just goes along the street, from the corner of Widow Barney's house all the way to the corner of Hartman and Center. It's all his cars. And one day they weren't there, and I was talking to Barney, and it was like the clouds had lifted. We had a decent place to live again back. But I've been encouraged by Dr. Chase, a fellow resident that I respect and lives on the other corner of Hartman, to get a petition up, and I have talked to 6 to 8 people who are quite willing to sign the petition, which practically is just to beg the city to enforce the ordinance, which in one of the houses that's newly been occupied, just been remodeled and occupied by 4 ladies, we're more annoyed at the fact that the owner is a real estate guy, and he lied to us. He said he was going to rent only to a single family, which is the code for our neighborhood. But then he turned around and went for the money. He's moved out to a gated community in East Fayetteville, and he's left us with 4 very pretty and nice. I've spoken to a few of them, and if I was a younger man, I would be one of the 6 to 8 young bucks that drive up and down and park in front of their house, and yeah, you see what I'm saying? It doesn't fit in with the community that I bought into, and I looked at the laws of the city before I bought into that community, and they're supposed to protect the value of my property, and it's not being done because it's difficult. And the only thing that I can think of that I can do, or that the people in my community can do, is to have a petition, present it to you, and you can take it from wherever that goes, you know, for what that's worth. I can ask, and I have talked to the guy from the traffic department about making both sides of what I call middle Hartman. Hartman's only 3 blocks long. Down my end, it's narrow. There's no worries. You can't park on either side, although one house does. If they make both sides no parking, that would go a long way to eliminate renting to multiple, to non-families, because they don't like to park behind each other in the driveway. You know, it would go a long way, but it wouldn't stop it.
The petition of the neighborhood for no parking on both sides of the street would be helpful.
It would be helpful.
If you could get everybody to sign that.
Something I'll
Can
learn too.
I butt in?
Absolutely.
The sign, you know where I live?
Yes, I do.
All right. The signs that are there were put up for this very reason. I went around, and this has been, you know, a few years ago, and I went around and measured the streets, the width of the streets. And I went to the police department and talked to them about it, and went to the fire department and measured the fire truck and asked them about turning radius. Same way with the ambulances. Most of those streets are older, they're narrow. If you put 1 car or 2 cars on one side of the street, you've made a one-way street. And that's what we were trying to avoid. So by getting the majority, not everybody, but if you get the majority, when Perry Franklin, who I was dealing with at the time, he said if you get the majority of the people on that side of the street to sign the petition, then they will put signs up. If you get them on both sides, then they'll put them on both sides. But the gentleman here may have got involved in some of that. On some of those streets, we've actually had fist fights during ball games because they would come head to head and nobody would back up or give. You
It
know?
just seems like a bad idea.
Something I learned a couple months ago was I had some neighbors approach me on the street similar, and actually you don't have to have a petition to get a street marked no parking on either side if it's 27 feet or less in width.
Mhm.
And that's something that's important, because if it's less than that in width, they can mark it as that as a safety concern without having to make a petition. It is good to know what the people around you want.
I think yours is what I was
Support you.
Yeah.
Um,
Another thing is, I actually had a parking issue come up yesterday, where an entire street was used as parking for overflow for a community center, but it was a residential neighborhood, and they can't park within 30 feet of a stop sign, or it can be considered an unconsenting tow. I spent a couple hours today reading parking ordinances. That was very enthralling. And also 20 feet from a crosswalk. So, you know, if they're within that area, you can actually have them towed without owner consent. But you said your street's actually wider than 27 feet.
It depends on where it is on there,
Yeah.
but I've walked on Hartman a lot, and
Yeah.
I think and I remember you doing that.
Mhm.
I think we
Yeah.
couldn't bank on that. We needed to go to petition.
Yeah, this was,
A few
Perry
weeks
was,
ago.
I mean, this is his idea to let people be aware of it, but, I mean, we're neighbors a few blocks apart there, but it is, when you get, and we've discussed this on other issues, but when you get more people than what the ordinance calls for, you also have one or more cars per person, which, you know, comes into what I was talking about.
Well, I know. Well, I know. My neighborhood had a similar issue about 4 years ago with a 5-bedroom house occupied by 5 young persons. I try to focus on behaviors and not if they're go to school or just young people working or older people working, no matter what their age are or what they do. But we had 5 people living in this house across the street, and of course 5 other accompanying cars almost every night. And it took a while to work the process. And the code enforcement changing the window of hours when they go out was helpful. And I know just this spring I actually had to knock on a couple of doors myself, but through doing that and working with code enforcement, we were able to get the landlord to agree to only rent to the necessary amount of people. But on the parking subject, this problem we encountered yesterday, we've already resolved. I think we have a possible resolution because they're going to be painting the curbs on the areas in which they can't park as well yellow. So that's another option we can throw out there. But if we could have the specific addresses, I mean, I'll go and walk myself, and I'm sure Rhonda would look at it too. And I mean,
I
I'm
walk through
happy
your neighborhood
all the time,
all
I'm
the
sure.
time, and I think you have a beautiful street, and I guess I'm not seeing, I guess one thing I wanted to ask you was, is it the number of cars in the no parking area, or is it behavior related, that when you call in, you may not get the response? Because I feel like what I hear from our police department is that when it's a behavior issue, they come running. But when it's a car park, you said you had one that took 24 hours, that would automatically go down on their level of priorities because, but so it sounds to me like when I heard you talking, it's like the cars are really bothering you a lot, the cars on the streets and too many cars.
Too many cars.
So like if it was a family with 15 kids, which there are some around, they could do that, right? And they're not breaking the law if they're in the parking places.
The ordinance states that there are to be no more than 4 cars per house.
Right.
Per house. And I have an occupant he owns 4 cars and a motorcycle himself, and he's got a party
He's
car.
over.
Yeah, the bar's parked out there for a long time.
Yeah, it's gone, and again, that's one of the reasons why he wants me to step out in the street with him.
So this is the number of cars that's really, we're not dealing with behavior and, right now, what you're talking about.
In his behavior that bothers me is him
I
wanting
got
me
it.
to step out.
I got it. That's behavior. I got
Yeah, you don't
No, I
want
got
that
you.
part, yeah.
But back to the kind of what you would like for maybe our police department to hear a little bit more about is enforcing the number of cars. you're
Well,
not really...
I don't believe that's a police matter. I think that's the city ordinance, a housing matter, as is the number of occupants.
So the CHAD office is what you're, I'm trying to figure out what you want us to kind of...
Well,
Parking on the street.
I'm trying to make Chad's job a little easier by providing black and white proof that when these people say, oh, no, there's only 3 of us here, and he's going to say, he can look up these license plate numbers and say, well, we've got these people here consistently,
You want the
day after
police to
day
look
after
up and
day
see if people
after
are married
day.
or not.
How
Okay.
can you say they're not living there?
I see.
Because, as I said, after
You want
my
them to be
wife
married
gets
in
off,
there.
I
Okay.
walk around and take multiple pictures to show that I'm not doing it just on the weekends when they have their parties. Every day the same cars are parked there. They're in different positions, so it's not the same day, you know, I don't get multiple copies of the same picture. They're all in different places because I go out on different days. And
I understand.
so, I'm volunteering to give you all, or Chad, or anybody, all of these pictures. I've tried to identify some of them with the house address. And again, you know, sometimes their girlfriends are camping out there all week, and sometimes it's just one day or 2 days, and sometimes it's one of them, sometimes it's
Are you?
I don't mind. I understand all of that.
Are you involved?
That'd be great. Thank you.
Were you
Good.
involved
I'd love that.
with that incident where there was 3 or 4 girls living in one house, and there was actually 6 or 7 girls there,
On the
and they
corner.
went and quizzed them about. They said, well, 3 of them are maids.
No, the ones that I ran across
Said,
were
well,
only.
show me your social security receipts.
Yeah,
And then
no, I wasn't part
gone.
of that one. One of the new
This
houses,
is getting serious.
some people bought property on Palmer and Sawyer, on the corner there. It was a 5-bedroom house. Well, they divided the property up on the infill concept, and they built 2 other houses with multi-bedrooms. They're all 4- and 5-bedroom houses. They're not there for single families, they're there for profit. They're small warehouses, so to speak. And I was approached by some of the girls who got up their nose, and she marched over to my bench and wanted to know why I was being such a bad student, so yada, yada, yada. And I said, but look, you can't have more than 3 people there unless you're a family. She said, but we're all sisters, sorority sisters. I said, I believe you. Go away. Go away. Go back to class. And then their father came. And there's another fellow that's on the other corner, and he and I both may have called in a few of their parties because they're very popular girls, and they had parties, and lots of guys, lots of cars, and Sawyer's is another wide street, and they're parking there, and you can't get 2 bicycles side-by-side past when their boyfriends are parked in Sawyer, and they want to know what my problem is. And I said, because you can't tell me when I need a fire truck or an emergency vehicle, you know, and
So it's illegal parking, it's really...
illegal
And
parking
Alan's just...
that threatens my life, my wife's life, the welfare of my house.
Illegal.
Yeah.
So you're gonna take the pictures for
Can I
Dawn
take
tomorrow?
those?
Do you
Oh,
want me to
absolutely.
that?
I
I'm
have
gonna
a-
look at them if you don't mind.
I have a meeting tomorrow, and if after the meeting, I'll get your email address and phone number, and I'll update you after the meeting,
Yeah.
and then
Yeah.
I'll talk to
These are listing of the 13 residents. Now, I do want to make the point, and you touched on it a minute ago, not all of those 13 residences are a problem. Some of those kids are quiet and they behave themselves. But there's 2 houses in particular, the ones across the privacy fence which I built with the owner's permission. Well, his permission was, I don't give a damn what you do, we're moving. So I built the privacy fence. And now the 4 or 5 people who live in the house now, they're upset with the fact that they have a privacy fence to look at instead of the interior of my garage and my workshop. So, in sum, I would like to do everything I can do, and the pictures are one thing, the petition is another thing, to have the city enforce the residency occupancy and the number of vehicles per house. Because like I say, one fella he doesn't have the party barge anymore, and he blames me directly, and I don't blame him because I'm the one that kept complaining about it. In the name of, for Dr. Chase, who is one of my favorite professors, was 4 years ago, and Widow Barney. I work for both of them. I've changed their light bulbs and mowed their grass, and that's the only reason. I don't have any problem with that during the winter time because I'm not down there. But when I'm down there, I stay on private property because he's threatening. I believe he's the one that lets the air out of my tires. I believe he's the one that put a sign on the side of my car that said, "Don't park here anymore. This is my place." And I turned that one into the city.
Good. Well, thank you for turning that in. That's absolutely inappropriate behavior, for sure. Yeah. So thank you for sharing that. Does anyone else have something they'd like to share on that position?
Yes, and he doesn't have it. It is his wife's. She is truly his wife. And that Great Dane knocked down Miss Jordan, and she is now a simpleton. She has 80-something stitches one day because he doesn't keep the dog up properly. He doesn't have a properly fenced back patio. It's a Great Dane, and Miss Jordan is about this high, and she's walking her little bitty mouse of a dog down the street like she does for used to. She doesn't do it anymore. Her son does, and I talked to him about that, and he says, "Mom's gone."
So I have a question about that. Is the dog just not in a fence when he's home, or all the time?
He's on a deck, but he could.
He's on a deck that he could leave any time he's got a mind to.
And that's something last year, and I was reappointed to the Animal Services Board, so we'll take that back up. But last year we actually discussed that, and you can actually have an animal off a leash on your own property, and it's not, the animal is not breaking the law, I guess, until he steps over your property line.
Yep.
But if he's not doing that, then that would.
Well, he came out to the street. She was in the street and knocked her down. Well, she was in the hospital.
She was unconscious. They sent her to the hospital for quite a while. Like I said, 87 stitches, and she's now simple. Nice little old lady. And this guy, he went to Walmart, bought some flowers, and put it in their mailbox. And that's that. And he's not apologetic about it. He's what they call an alpha male. He's 33, and he thinks that there's something, it's going to be an accomplishment to beat up a 65-year-old guy. So I keep away from him. Like I say, I get on private property, and he's got enough good sense not to trespass. Oh, during daylight hours. But again, that's getting into other issues. But I'm just here to ask the city to enforce the ordinances that I read and was reassured by when I invested a great deal of money in a piece of land and I built a house there.
No more than 3 unrelated.
And they can't be sorority
Single family
sisters. Being
neighbors.
sorority sisters doesn't count.
I'll, like I said, after the meeting, I'll get you the contact information, and I'll follow up this week.
Right now, Ozref, Ozark, I'm a referee, OZREF at hotmail.com. I've had an easier time in the middle of some games where we've got 30 guys going at each other, hammer and tongs, than I have with that bloke across the street.
Sorry. How long have you all been neighbors?
He's lived there a few years.
Yeah, he bought the property for more than $250,000, so there's none of us think he's going to move very soon because it takes a heck of a lot of money for it.
You do so beautiful street. We'll work together to help see what we can do to.
I know a number of retired people, widows, professors, etc. I'll have the petition organized for you. The people who live all around this fella, well, our names are going to be on it. And everybody who's concerned about their property values will have their names on it. And I appreciate everything you can do.
And we'll do our best.
Yeah,
We'll meet tomorrow, and then we'll talk, and we'll get back with you.
Now that we know about it, we can definitely work on it.
Thank you.
Thank you. Do you have any neighborhood concerns you'd like to share with us tonight?
Just one. I know part of the Weddington development project is to get the more pedestrian-friendly area. But currently, we've got the Salem that runs from Weddington to Persimmon and then into my sub. But
So
maybe,
Okay.
probably.
West.
Yeah. Salem's a nice winding street, and it's only got a 30-mile-an-hour limit. But it's dangerous for pedestrians to walk because there is no sidewalk. And I was wondering, is there anything in the plans yet to put at least a sidewalk on one side of that? From Persimmon to Weddington. That's where, the neighborhood market, Planet Fitness, and then down to Persimmon, which then it just goes into the subdivision. But I walk it almost every day, and I mean, it's not safe. I won't go when I often have my grandkids, and I'll go to the market. I put them in the car and drive that mile instead of walking because it's not safe to have them out. And I see many people doing the same kind of things, and I've heard comments. So I was just wondering, is there anything in the works yet for a
I think there is,
sidewalk
but
along
I'm not
there?
very prepared to talk about that tonight. But if you'll let me give you my card, do you have an email address so I could get back in touch with you on that? And I will give you a good answer to that. I know we've talked about that. Do you know, Alan, off the top of your mind? I don't
want to say that it's on the sidewalk plan and be wrong, but I know that it's been discussed.
I will get back to you. We've been talking sidewalks a lot, and I have a street committee meeting tomorrow night, and I will get an answer for you.
Okay, great.
Okay?
There's going to be so many sidewalks built in Ward 4 and the rest of the city in the next year that people are going to be saying, no more sidewalks.
And it's funny, some people don't want to, so you're in, when you get to Persimmon.
I'm in Mountain Ranch.
Mountain Ranch, okay, yes, okay, good. I definitely can email you about that, I know some, and I'll copy you so you'll know the answer too, and then we'll get you notified about that, okay? That's a very good point, because I think you're going to get more and more people who are interested in walking that area, for sure.
Absolutely.
That's a good point, I'm glad we're really interested. Al and I both have been trying to get input on sidewalks, and it is sort of funny, some people don't love sidewalks.
And you can overdo it, absolutely. But you've got this route, but there's no safe way.
And especially to schools and to stores, when people want to walk to the store and walk to the school, those are safe, very environmentally friendly ideas, and we need to embrace those. So, thank you.
It's so important because I know every morning I take a certain route, and there's not been a sidewalk on this route to the bypass ever in Fayetteville. And there's one person I see at a certain time every day carrying his lunch bag and his backpack. And it's not a student, I believe he's a professor, and he walks probably about 4 miles to the school every day, and there's no sidewalk, and every morning I have to move over and make sure there's not oncoming traffic.
Yeah, and I've encountered that same type of situation in other places, and you feel for that person. I mean, and there probably would be a lot more people who would do it in part if it was a safer route to walk. I feel, terrible every time I get in the car to drive a mile.
Yeah.
But, at certain times of the day, it's worse than others.
We walk a lot on our street that has a lot of very small yards, and people don't really want that sidewalk to encroach into their yard, and our section of the street has a sidewalk in our yard. Those people are sort of like, you want to stop in for a glass of water because they're in our yard.
Yeah, exactly.
But it's just a short
Before they
piece.
develop this would be the time to put it in, because this is all wooded area there right now, and designate space for it and give people the privacy and space. And once you have, ordinances, enforce them, because, your property value is tremendous, and you lose that because of people are allowed to do whatever they feel like it. It's a shame.
Then you have the debate of whether the sidewalk has green space between the street and the sidewalk. I personally kind of like walking on a sidewalk that's right next to the street, because I don't want to have to see the city go in there and mow and plant and water all that green space.
I'll take it either way.
And but I walk on both. Every morning when I take my walk, one's up against the street, and then the other part of the sidewalk, and then I have a section of the sidewalk that has a section of the street that has no sidewalk, and I jump in the bushes when the car comes too fast. So.
And I have it both ways at my house. I live on a corner, and one side is directly on the street, and the other is set back with grass.
They're all good. And then,
On on myself, yeah.
You walk by my house, take your life in your hands, and yet I sympathize with people who don't want, you know, what might result in 8 feet of their parking, or their yard, or their trees they planted, or their flowers. Speaking of professors, the bushes down there on Markham that he's planted, they're so, you know, what do you do? What do you do? It's harder than it looks like to be on city council and try to, you know, try to help people, because you don't do this job unless you care about the neighborhood issues and the ward issues.
Not all neighbors agree.
But not all neighbors agree. Sometimes people you like don't agree. Some of your best friends, you still want to live with them once you're not on city council, you know? And, yeah. So we will get back to you. I will get back to you. Alan's going to get back to you. I'm going to get back to you.
I'm going to take on the parking and the overall.
And I'm going to take on sidewalks. And what would you like for me to do?
Well, I've got 4 or 5 pages.
Oh, man!
I've got the 2 things from you that we talked about before.
I got the jump. I got here early.
Larry, how are you feeling tonight?
Good.
You feel like you have anything we can talk about?
You what?
Anything you want to talk about?
No, you can have my rabbits if you want them.
Okay. Well, they are, I swear, I've been walking in the morning. I came home the other morning and I said, I want to see so many rabbits in yards. It's like today is rabbit.
Yeah, they're really, this is a good year for them.
Good year, they're cute.
You know, I really think one of the reasons they've invaded our neighborhood, there's a 5-foot easement, it's over in Cross Keys, and there's a 5-foot easement, and people have all fenced. Everybody's got privacy fences, but between the fences, there's a 5-foot space that grows up. And I think that's where they're breeding. But like I say, cold weather gets them, so they'll disappear.
That's where we plant those peanut trees, right? That I've been talking about so much.
You mentioned pecans.
Pecan trees, there you
They
go.
probably won't do very well. They live in low, they require pretty humid. You know, if you look at where they're growing around here, you see them in southeast Kansas along the Ocho River, places like that. So they, I don't know if they do well in this. Have you seen any of them around town? They don't know many of them.
No,
South
Arkansas,
Arkansas.
much of eastern Arkansas around.
Right, it gets lower, more humid, they do well.
Well, we may be small, but we're the word with the synagogue and the mosque and the homeless and the chamber.
Yes.
And the best police and fire department any city could have in the whole world. I would say shout out to all of you all. I know that we sometimes don't stop so often to say, even when we talk about our problems, you were nice to go ahead and talk about the fact that they do respond. You call the police department, they do respond. And I'm very happy you punched that out in the midst of
No, they do, and again, Chad and the bloke that's, you know, whose rubber is on the road, the fellow who goes out and knocks on the doors and meets these people who are guaranteed to be unhappy about what they hear. You know, full credit to them.
It's a tough job, and we probably need more people. I mean, services equals people equals taxpayer dollars, and it's hard sometimes to know where we stop with, do we need more people in certain departments? And I would guess that we need more people in some
We're starting to
departments,
look
police,
at-
fire, and code compliance.
Start to look at some of those
Yeah.
things too.
So, we've got our cards, we've got our contact. Alan is Ward 4.
_POS2 at ci.fayetteville.ar.us.
It's unbelievable.
But if you go on accessfayetteville.org,
It might be
you
the
can,
same for city council.
It's crazy.
you can, if you go to accessfayetteville.org, you can actually find our email addresses
Much easier.
easily, and I have cards here if anyone.
But Ward 4 _position 2, Ward 4 _position 1, and if you can't find us, then we're both in the phone book, I think.
Yes.
I know I am.
You can Google me there.
All right. Thank y'all for being here tonight. Thank you for your input and your concerns, and please let us know if we missed something tonight that we need to talk about, okay?
I'll send you an email in a
Please,
couple of days.
I'm going to give you a card. We'll be back in July. Botanical Gardens of the Ozarks going to be here to talk a little bit. Walt Tyler, Ward 4 citizen, and talk a little bit about those issues going on at Botanical Gardens. All right. Thanks, everybody.